Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Present.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Council President Brady.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. President. Ms. Lou.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here right now. I know today is a very good day to welcome our new council member here, but I would like to bring up a few points, which was the questions asked by some of the council member here last week, Tuesday, the HSSA, Health and Human Services and Aging Committee meeting. Ms. Baker asked a very interesting question. She said she was wondering, exactly 2227, this building right now is, the building condition is from good to fair or fair to poor? And I would like to answer you, it's poor. This building actually should be demolished first and rebuilt. Actually, right now, I think all the council members, right now, you have a package to show you the photo. This photo, you will see the floor is kind of a green color, those three photos.
Saw that.
This is the work actually done 2 years ago for that particular rare opportunity. No fuss money to came down for this location, 2100 Lakeside Avenue, which is a county building, to do some work to improve the building conditions. This particular thing you look at is in a particular bathroom. 2016, also the May 4th, there was a public hearing about 2227 Payne Avenue. One person particularly came here, if you remember, she was pregnant. Her pregnancy was declared by 2 different physicians as high risk. She fell in that restroom, you don't know how many times. The floor right now you see is green, with some kind of texture stuff on it, but you can all see all the peels, all the parts already peeled. Those are not the parts you can really say it's only the normal wear and tear. So that tells us how good the workmanship actually was. For Eden, if they cannot do the work themselves, they have to get an outside contractor to do the job. However, this is how homeless people have been collectively viewed and treated. For you to get a rare opportunity to have money to improve the building, this is what kind of work you put in. They took out functional items, put in dysfunctional items. It was decided by an architect firm who were a bunch of guys who live probably in their own home, not a sharing space like 200, 300 people in one building or 2 conjunction buildings. So they don't know how female had to go through the morning crisis in order to get themselves ready because they will all get kicked out. Please understand, the problem is not just all the answers they gave you, it's all the answers they didn't give you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No, Mr. President.
All right. Today we will be conducting a confirmation hearing. So you've picked a good day to begin, Councilwoman. Welcome to the confirmation hearing at which Council will consider the appointment of Shane Alex Pelham as Director of the Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. The Department of Public Safety and Justice Services was established by ordinance in 2011 to replace the former Department of Justice Affairs. The department was previously headed by Brandy Carney. The Department of Public Safety and Justice Services administers the county's public safety grants, regional enterprise data sharing system, oversees the Office of Emergency Management, the Cuyahoga Emergency Communication Systems, and the Witness Victim Service Center. The hearing process will proceed as follows. The nominee will be offered the opportunity to address his qualifications, motivations for seeking the positions, and outlooks and plans regarding the office. Council members will then be offered the opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. We will do so in rounds, allowing each council member to ask 2 questions per round until all council questions have been answered. Once all questions have been asked, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council approve or reject the nomination at tonight's regular meeting. If we are not ready to act on that motion today, we will defer making the recommendation. Assuming a motion to recommend approval or rejection has been made, council will vote on that recommendation at tonight's regular meeting. Thank you, and let's begin. Clerk, please read the resolution into the record.
Resolution number 2018-0230, confirming the county executive's appointment of Shane Alex Pelham upon his taking the oath of office as Director of the Department of Public Safety and Justice Services.
Mr. Pelham, please come forward.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Make sure I don't fall when I sit down.
Make yourself comfortable.
How you doing? Good afternoon. I believe Chief Carney had some comments she wanted to do before.
That's fine.
Okay.
Didn't.
Thank you, Council President, and welcome, new Councilwoman and Cuyahoga County Council. I just wanted to say a few things because I've worked with Shane for a number of years. Again, Brandy Carney, Chief Public Safety Justice Officer. I'm standing before you with a recommendation to appoint Alex Pelham as the Director of Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. Myself, Deputy Director Lindy Burt, the Executive and Chief of Staff all had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Pelham and interview him, and we're very pleased with what he could bring. It's somewhat bittersweet for myself. I loved my previous role in the department. Forming and maintaining relationships with internal and external public safety partners, such as police and fire chiefs, is essential to the position. The agency does so much for the residents of Cuyahoga County and at times can be overlooked, from coordination of resources during emergency events to support of victims of domestic violence. I'll miss the day-to-day involvement and the amazing staff. However, I have no doubt that Mr. Pelham is a great fit for the job and will carry the agency forward. Frank Bova, our previous Chief of Public Safety, my former boss and dear friend, used to say, everyone can have good ideas, but it's those who can effectively implement those ideas that are truly valuable. I've worked closely with Mr. Pelham for 3 years, and he has been with the City of Cleveland, and implementation is something he does well. For example, the City of Cleveland's Emergency Operations Center now works as such a valuable tool in every large incident for the city. All levels of the City of Cleveland, from the mayor's office to department directors and EOC staff, have been appropriately trained on their roles, and I've seen this expand and now operate the way a EOC should function, all under the leadership of Mr. Pelham. So he does have an opening statement, and I appreciate the time before you this morning, or this
Thank
afternoon.
you. Good to see you. Mr. Pelham, make yourself comfortable.
Good to see you again. So first, thank you for having me here. President Brady, Vice President Jones, members of the council. My name is Alex Pelham, and I'm honored to appear before you as Executive Buttich's nominee for the Director of Public Safety and Justice Services. Thank you to both you and your staff for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm pleased to be here to tell you about my qualifications as well as my experience for this position. First and foremost, I'm a husband and father of 2. My wife, Stacy, who's here, serves as an assistant director of law for the City of Cleveland. She and I have been married for almost 12 years. We have 1 son, Jackson, who's 9, and we have 1 daughter, Thea, who will be 4 months old next week. I received my bachelor's from Western Carolina University and my master's in public administration from the University of North Florida. 3.5 years ago, I accepted the position of emergency manager with the City of Cleveland. I remember back to one of my first conversations with Director Michael McGrath. I remember it vividly. He noted to me, the Emergency Operations Center's lost, and I need you to find it. Upon my arrival, just 1 year before the RNC, it was apparent that there were changes needed to operations, planning, technological build-out of what was going on. Through the use of federal grant dollars, I worked with Safety IT to build specs and to lead the design for what is one of the state-of-the-art emergency operations centers in the state of Ohio. The project was budgeted just over $600,000 and included 3 interconnected rooms with 30 individual displays for information, highlighted by a 16-screen video wall. I'm proud to say that this project was completed on time, it was on budget, and has been in full compliance with all city and federal audits from the Department of Justice to date. Changing the operations in the Emergency Operations Center in the city of Cleveland was a bit of a different challenge, though. Unlike the fixes on the technological side, there's no blueprint, there's no vendor to immediately flip a switch and fix what you need to do. As you know, culture change can be somewhat difficult. A quick analysis of the operations yielded findings that showed a lack of multidisciplinary support and command cohesion. Through the installation of the incident command system and the building of relationships, which I think are the most paramount thing we have in this occupation, I was able to put together a roadmap that would constitute change in less than a year. One major step in this included reducing multiple operational plans between our Division of EMS, Police, and Fire, as well as other non-safety entities, into one comprehensive multidisciplinary plan. While I understand this may not seem to be very consequential on the surface, this change yielded a significant delta in information flow, effectiveness, accountability, and coordination in response. By utilizing this new unified effort, the Cleveland Emergency Operations Center coordinated the planning and response of over 80 individuals from roughly 30 different agencies, ranging from the Cleveland Clinic to the United States Coast Guard, for 162 continuous hours of operation during the Republican National Convention, which was here in 2016. This marked both the longest and the most complex EOC activation in the city of Cleveland's history and remains so to date. The changes I mentioned provide one coordinated vision moving forward of how an event, an incident, or a disaster will now be managed within the city of Cleveland. This enhanced level of coordination between agencies like law enforcement and public works continues today, and it allows a more efficient and effective response to events such as July 4th or our annual St. Patrick's Day Parade. As I conclude my time with the city of Cleveland and reflect back on that initial conversation with Director McGrath, I believe his directive of finding the EOC has not only been accomplished, but I sit here today confident in saying that Cleveland now serves as a nationwide model of how an EOC should operate during a large special event or a disaster. Prior to my hiring in Cleveland, I was lucky enough to work for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department's Emergency Preparedness Division. I served in multiple roles that made me both a better professional and a leader. On the planning side, I authored nearly 100 plans that dealt with diverse topics such as hurricane evacuation, bulk distribution of goods, and pet-friendly sheltering. In the realm of operations, I was fortunate enough to work high-profile events such as tropical storms, wildfires, a high-profile murder trial with international exposure, and the week of festivities surrounding the annual Florida-Georgia football game, which brings over 200,000 people to the city of Jacksonville annually. I also coordinated an effort called Operation Urban Blight, which saw the Departments of Public Works, Code Enforcement, and Fire address illegal dumping, overgrowth of vacant lots, and dilapidated housing throughout the sprawling area of over 900 square miles that makes up the city of Jacksonville. This initiative served to improve the quality of life for many of our residents through the disposal of solid waste, as well as the demolition of abandoned houses that served to facilitate illegal activities. During my tenure in Jacksonville, I was appointed to the state of Florida's incident management team by then Governor Charlie Crist and received an award from the National Homeland Security Association in 2014 for excellence in public awareness. In closing, if confirmed as the Director of Public Safety and Justice Services, I believe my education, my past experience, my service on Cuyahoga County's Emergency Services Advisory Board, and my relationship with the local, state, and federal partners in this area will allow me to be successful. I believe there's an opportunity present at this time to build on momentum that was gained in the realm of regional collaboration during our prep for the RNC, and to continue to build on already established programs set forth in motion by my predecessors. We should always strive to be more effective and more efficient with what we're doing. I look forward to working with this body and all other stakeholders, some of which are here, to continue to make this county a premier location to safely live, work, and play for our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. Thank you for your time with this opening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Just to remind the members, there will be 2 questions apiece, and we'll get back to you, of course, if you have more questions. Just try to signal me, and I'll try to keep track of this. Who would like to go first? Councilman Gallagher.
Welcome, Mr. Pelham. You're coming in at an opportune time and an unopportune time for us. And if Mr. McGrath thought he was lost, we're a bit lost ourselves, and we're looking for a way to fix it. I'm sure you're aware of what I'm speaking, and we'll be dealing with that in due time. I think it's unfair to quiz you on that, but I'm sure you've been following along. Your employment with Cleveland is a positive in that you got to work with all the local representatives of the police and fire department. That's one thing that Mrs. Carney brought to the table that I found 7 years ago to be invaluable. She speaks of you highly. I don't know you, and I purposely just stayed at arm's length because I trust her. I trusted Sheriff Bova. I trusted Director Bova. And I'm confident in the future I'll trust you. But that has to be earned. And it will be fired, and you will be tested. And I'm looking forward to working with you. But I will ask you one question. How do you see the chain of command? Where are you, and who do you answer to?
Okay, thank you for your question through the chair to Councilman Gallagher. My position as Director of Public Safety and Justice Services reports to Chief Carney, who reports to the County Executive, Armin Budish. I don't know how much you want me, overseeing the 5 offices and the admin side of the house, working with those partners and informally working with our police chiefs, working with our fire chiefs, our other stakeholders throughout the county to incorporate change.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, that if you saw a problem, you would go to Mrs. Carney, and Mrs. Carney's job would go to the executive. I think we need to start following the chain of command in this county, and that's been an issue, and we'll deal with that later. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Who's next? Councilwoman Simon and then Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you. Congratulations
Thank you.
on the opportunity to speak to us. The question I have is, while you're at the City of Cleveland and even in contemplation of this new role that you might hold, whether you've considered the impact of climate change and what, if any, environmental situations our Lakefront County is going to be facing and how that would be incorporated into any kind of disaster planning.
No, absolutely. Through the chair to the councilwoman. During my time in Cleveland, we authored a ton of plans. I didn't go into that deep as well, but one of the ones that we really put a lot of effort into is this extreme weather. We worked with now Chief Gray, previously Chief McGowan. I served on the Climate Action Committee for the brand new update that just came out recently with the summit. I've been an attendee of those summits 2 of the 3 years, 3 of the 4 years I've been here. I think you have to look at the science. You have to look at what's going on in order to plan smart. You can't plan in a vacuum. You can't plan with your eyes closed. You have to take people that are a little smarter than you in some subjects, and I'm not too proud to say something. Some people know a lot of things a lot better than I do. But to work with them, to incorporate them in the planning process, because if you just plan from a safety standpoint with police, fire, and EMS, you may be missing variables, or you may be missing data that's real, it's there, that leaves gaps. And it's a detriment to what you're doing if you don't include a whole community approach, because it's not just that, it's also our businesses, it's also our nonprofits, our stakeholders in this area. I hope that addresses your question.
It does. And from your work with the Sustainability Department in the City of Cleveland, what, if any, extreme weather patterns have you been informed of in terms of what we'd be facing, if you even know?
We haven't delved that deep into it. I know there's what I spoke with Chief Gray multiple times is the worsening of what's going on. So if you dealt with drought, there would be extreme drought. If you dealt with excessive rainfall in some of the regions of this country, that you could expect more of that on a higher scale more often. But anything further than that, I'd really be speaking a little bit out of my area.
Okay, so lastly, it's not a question, it's a statement that our Department of Sustainability is actually collaborating with other agencies to come up with their own climate change plan, which will be coming before the Environmental Committee, and I hope you would, if you get this appointment, be involved with that process to incorporate the planning around what we expect to be happening here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you, Council President. With the reluctance of communities to cooperate with law enforcement, because of fear of retaliation by criminals. How have you given any thought as to strengthening the protection for witnesses and victims? Like what role the Witness and Victim Family Justice Center can play?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair to Councilwoman Brown. I think our witness and victim services provide unfortunately, with recent events, provide a service that's very beneficial, that's needed. Some of our most vulnerable residents process through that and work. In the realm of, if we're talking physical protection, that's within a jail or with anything like that, I'd have to defer that to the sheriff's office. But one thing you'll learn about me, which many of the people here do know, I'm not shy to pick up the phone and pull people together. I don't know if that's part of my Southern background or just a little bit of that, but I'm not shy to pick up the phone. There are people that have expertise. Speaking with Jill, manager over witness and victims, there are cases where they've worked with the sheriff in the past, where if someone has experienced that. But to get into details, I don't want to put any hypotheticals in front of this group, but I think the core piece to that is pulling together correct partners with the sheriff's office, with the prosecutor's office, with many of our nonprofit partners, whether it be Frontline or the children advocates, that we pull the right people together and we don't plan or act in a silo to where we're just going off without pulling all the resources to help.
And just to follow up, in Warrensville, we've had a number of situations where people that were supposed to be in protection were retaliated against. So it's a subject that hits very close to home. So happy to, if you're appointed, kind of explore some ideas on what we might be able to do. And also, you mentioned Urban Blight program that you started. Another matter that kind of hits communities pretty hard. Have you given any thought as to your role, how you might be able to help us address this in the county?
Based on what we, through the chair, based on what we did in Jacksonville, it was based on one core principle, that everyone has the right to be happy and everyone has the right to take pride in where they live, regardless of your economic status, regardless of anything else. So by doing that, we worked primarily with Public Works, and we identified areas that there were a lot of solid waste. We worked through the council there in Jacksonville, which is city-county consolidated, 19 members, and we leveraged funding to be able to put cameras up to where the sheriff's office could see some of these high-numbered illegal dumping sites. That way we were able to try to mitigate, curb against that, have some prevention measures, as well as just that collaboration. When you start to pull people together and you start to pull the sheriff's office, you start to pull the fire department together on what could be fire hazards, you start to pull Public Works, you start to note that there are pieces of what they do that work together, that if you were all in separate rooms or you were all in separate buildings, that's not how it works. It doesn't work well, it's not efficient. Sometimes you see overlapping of services. But I firmly believe that some of the programs, the principles that we put forth in Jacksonville could be applied in the county and would be beneficial to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Jones is next, then Councilman Tuma, and then Councilman Schron.
Mr. Pelham, given the existing financial crisis in East Cleveland, what would your approach be to ensure East Cleveland residents have services in case of emergency?
Through the chair, the vice president. That's a great question. I live in University Heights, so I'm close to that area. I think there are really three different ways, in my opinion, that you could do that. You can do it through mitigation, prevention type things, whether it be planning, working with the fire department, working with the police department, some of their public works, on whether it be emergency procedures, so that you know what you're going to do and it's coordinated and you can train on it. I think there are opportunities that are present in the preparedness realm as well for grants. I know the past history of this department's grant matching, whether it be SAFER, which gives multiple municipalities, individuals, or employees that can work in those safety forces, assistant firefighter grants, which provides equipment or upgrades. as well as, like I spoke a little bit about in my statement, working on the Emergency Services Advisory Board. We serve as the funding recommendation for urban area security as well as a state homeland grant. We also could provide grant writing assistance to where it may not be a county-wide grant. It may not be a Region 5 grant, but assistance from the grants office to help facilitate what they may need. In the realm of response, which dictates a little bit of what you're talking about as well, I've been here for both the waste fire that was here in East Cleveland. I worked with the Fire Chiefs Association, Chief Sweeney from Shakers here, through the County Emergency Operations Center as that coordination point to ensure that both assets from other county entities as well as the city of Cleveland were utilized. I think we could strengthen mutual aid, memorandums of understanding, first call types of things, as well as the explosion. We worked with our nonprofit partners, with the American Red Cross, to ensure that proper aid was being given to people, that support was there if they needed it. One thing that's coming down the line would also be the emergency dispatch through CCOMS. I believe that's coming in front of this board in next month, where CCOMS will provide the emergency dispatch along with the other. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
As you mentioned, in your time with the city of Cleveland, did you have any opportunity to be exposed or touch the consent decree? And if so, could you share that? And are there anything? Is there anything that you may have learned that you think might be able to be brought here to the county?
Through the chair and vice president, I was not involved in the consent decree. I don't want to speculate on any of that because my direct involvement wasn't present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have Councilman Tuma, then Schron, then Miller, then Baker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly, I don't want to get too much into the weeds. I think it's unfair to do that at these types of things. In general, what is your viewpoint, or what are your expectations of the people who report directly to you? What do you expect of people who are reporting directly to you?
Through the chair to the councilman, that's a great question. I think it's a fair question too. I work hard. I'm honest. I expect those two things right off the bat. I don't think there's really any wiggle room on those two things. One of the things that's guided me from the time I was in college, it was introduced to me, but the Athenian Oath, I'm sure everyone here has read it, but there's a piece in that that says, we left the city, paraphrasing, not less but greater than when we got it. That's what I expect. I expect that there to be hardworking individuals that are honest, that put the greater good of the county and its residents first. I mean, and I know that sounds somewhat cliche, but that's what public service is. That's why we're in this. And
Well, fair enough. I think it's a great answer. I like that answer. My second question is, to date, what would you say is your crowning achievement in your public service? What are you most proud of, other than Jackson and your daughter?
And my wife.
And your
Make sure we put her in there.
Have to throw your wife in there.
I think the RNC, through the chair, the councilman, I think the RNC, while that's the easiest one to pick, there's a lot of work that went into very basic things. And as this group knows, I'm not telling you anything. There was a little more that happened between June of 15 and July of 16. This guy named LeBron James made my June of 16 a little harder. With that parade, we dealt with police-involved shooting protests. We dealt with, so not only were we implementing a system, implementing new language, implementing new processes, but we also had to react. So you can't be tunnel vision on one thing. I'm very proud with that, and I'm proud with the relationships. And let me evolve on that. Relationships are the biggest thing that matter in public safety and in what I do. Without them, you can't get anything done. One great example of this is we brought people in from Washington, D.C., people that deal with these large, high-scale events every year, especially every 4 years. And through my relationship with then Director Chris Geldart, he sent over 12 people at no cost to the city of Cleveland to work in our EOC and to help with some of our people who might not be as trained as they need to be. I think those two answers in one, I know I kind of cheated, but I apologize. But that's really, that RNC and the relationships that were built through honesty. You know, there are people that we work with that may not agree with everything that I say, and that's okay. But they respect me and they know I'm coming from the right place and what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm most proud of from my time in Cleveland.
All right, thank you, and good luck to you.
Councilman Schwan.
I'd like the first one not to be a question other than a throwaway. Were you there at Jacksonville at the same time as our Director of Economic Development, Ted Carter?
Ted Carter, through the chair, yes, sir. Ted Carter and I worked under then Mayor Alvin Brown. He was in economic development. I spent a little bit of a short, brief stint working with the Chief Administrative Officer, pulling projects together. They were having some issues with cleaning up a project, so I was over there for about 6 months. When I went back to the fire department, one of the things we worked on was a vulnerability assessment for the building of City Hall itself, which is an older building, as well as a security analysis for the mayor's office, and Ted Carter was a part of that group that worked on that with us.
Recently, the city of Cleveland decided to transfer their responsibilities for jail services to the county jail. In your role, did you play any role whatsoever in either reviewing documents or looking at information or background as to the financial aspects, the operational aspects, or anything like that in that decision itself when it was made?
You know, through the chair to the councilman, no.
Okay,
I was not involved in that.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Miller.
Mr. President, Mr. Pelham, congratulations on your appointment. And there are a whole lot of folks in the public sector, private sector, nonprofit that are dealing with reentry in one way or another. And can you offer any ideas on how we might develop a more coordinated effort in Cuyahoga County in this regard?
Through the chair to the councilman, could you elaborate a little bit more on what that is? I don't want to speculate on what you're looking for. Reentry, speaking from correctional facilities, reentering.
I'm talking about the process of helping people who were previously incarcerated successfully become law-abiding and productive citizens.
Through the chair, while that's not something that I have been directly involved in my emergency management or my others, you know, I think there are great examples of programs like you have with Brandon Chorsky on Shaker Square. The name of his restaurant is Edwin's. Yes, there. Thank you. I think that's a great example. I think providing vocational opportunities to teach people skills, because a lot of times opportunities aren't there for whatever reason. You know, I'm not going to go into that realm, but you know, while I don't have personal experience in doing that, I think coordination of entities, coordination of assets can't hurt the process. Bringing different minds to the table, bringing different viewpoints. Because everybody in this room, everybody on this council has a different background, has a different family, has a different upbringing. Until we do that, I don't know that we can effectively go after it. You know, I would be willing that in any way, whether it be planning, much like that Operation Urban Blight was a little bit outside of my scope at that time, anything this office or this department could do, I'd be willing to work, whether it's grants or planning or any of those aspects.
Mr. President, Mr. Pelham, I'm not going to ask about the jail situation directly, but I'm going to talk about it indirectly. The United States of America is is essentially tied with Russia and way ahead of everybody else in the world as to having the highest percentage of its population incarcerated, and we certainly have our share in Ohio and Cuyahoga County, and my understanding is that even when high-quality programming exists, people rarely come out of the prison system as better people than when they first went in, and the report suggests the programming that we have is deficient in some serious areas. And my question is whether you agree with my belief that from a strategic standpoint, it's fundamentally important that we become much better at finding ways to keep people out of the jail and prison system in the first place, and that we find ways to significantly reduce our jail population, because it affects jail operations, it affects reentry, it affects our budget, it affects health and human services programs. It just messes up the numbers all over the place, and I would like to hear your basic philosophical thought on what you think about that.
There's a chair to the councilman. I can't speak to the current programs because I haven't been involved with some of the efforts to reduce recidivism. But I will agree in the general concept that we should be doing everything we can to help people once they get out become better people, because that not only affects them personally, but those are fathers, those are mothers, those are brothers, they're sisters. And through helping those people, you might be changing a whole generation. I know that's very optimistic, very kind of reading rainbow way to say this, but that's how I truly believe, and I hope that answers your question.
May I follow up?
Please.
I am greatly concerned about helping returning people reintegrate into society. But I have an even greater concern to try to keep people from getting into the jail and prison system in the first place. And I think that we need to do a whole lot more and find new and creative ways to divert people from ever getting there. And I would be interested in your thoughts on the importance of that.
Through the chair to the councilman, I agree 100%. One of the effective ways growing up, I've lived a little bit of everywhere, thanks to being in a Navy family, but one of the things that helped me being a son of a single mom with 4 kids was sports. Sports, while it provides a team structure, it shows you how to work with people. It can also provide a male role model or someone who is an authority figure that can help shape who you are. I think there are a lot of different programs that can work, and I think there are a lot of different avenues, and I'd be more than willing to offer our assets as it makes sense to help with those.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you, President, and congratulations on your nomination. A lot of questions have been asked, and I think I'd like to go where Councilman Gallagher somewhat directed his question. You referenced the RNC and some of the challenges you had and how building relationships and the honesty and hard work. But I guess I would ask what tools you would bring to the table when things don't go as well as you had hoped, that perhaps those above you are not seeing the same vision that you see, and that there are perhaps some challenges or problems that exist that you would like to make sure are seen and are not afraid to bring forward. What can you tell us about what you would do to correct some of the things that you may feel are very important, maybe detrimental to the structure of what it is that you are finding yourself in? And how would you change that culture to those that perhaps are at a higher level than you are, perhaps our chief that is here today, and even our executive?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councilwoman, I'd like to lead off with, I've been called a lot of things. Quiet and meek is probably not one of them. I'm not afraid to push what I think is right. And maybe for a point of clarification, not everything was perfect. With that rebuild in Cleveland, there were definitely challenges along the way. There were definitely people that disagreed with what I did. But, it kind of goes to a simple point of you do the right thing for the right reasons, you normally end up where you're supposed to get. To your question of how would you push it up or how would you go, I believe there's a time to disagree and there's a time not to disagree. I'd like, I'll put that on the table here. You're never going to see me in the newspaper bashing someone. That's not my style. You're never going to see me on this floor openly arguing with someone in the administration. That's not how I do it. You have to express your concerns when they happen. You have to have sound reason of why you're expressing your concerns. But at the end of the day, the chain of command, like was spoken about, an old mentor of mine once said, everybody has a boss and everybody ought to know who it is. And at the end of the day, that ultimate decision, I'm going to push up everything that I think is right. I'm probably going to push it more than once. But I hope that answers your question. I'm going to push what I think's right, and it's going to be based in fact. It's not going to be based in perception. It's not going to be a knee-jerk reaction. And if I need time, which I'm sure at some point I'll be in front of this body, and I'll say, I'm not going to speculate. I need to take a step back, and I need to come back. That's where I believe the answer to what you're asking is, and I hope that satisfies what you were looking for.
Yes, I mean, I think that in the position that you are about to take, I believe you will find those challenges to be there. And I was just curious as to how you would handle professionally, as you stated, a way of improving perhaps the environment that you're in without making it, as you say, public, without being a grandstander and all those things that we don't want to see, but also changing perhaps the culture of what's around you that could even be uncomfortable for those that you work for. And it sounds like you have those qualities. Relationship building is absolutely needed in that, and I look forward to seeing you work.
Through the chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Conwell.
Thank you. Through the President to Mr. Pelham. What role, if any, do you see the Department of Public Safety and Justice Affairs in combating the ongoing opioid epidemic?
Through the chair, thank you. That's unfortunately, this area has really been affected by that. What we spoke about, those relationships, I think play a key part because battling this epidemic is not just police. It's not just the hospitals. It's not just public health. And too often we find ourselves saying, oh, it's drugs, it's police. You can't go through that. You can't. There have to be our partners, whether it be fire, EMS, as well as some of our nonprofit partners like the Adams Board and some of our addiction services that help with that. 10 years ago, I think every cop would have scoffed at you if you'd have told them they were going to carry naloxone or Narcan. But best practices and what we see and while you're dealing with day-to-day things, this office, through our relationships both regionally and nationally, can find those and can pull people together. Even through something as simple as Manager Mark Christie over Emergency Management. Last year they had a Emergency Management Summit. I guess it was this year. don't want to go to 2019 too soon. But bringing in speakers, being able to provide people with firsthand knowledge of how they've dealt with things, how some practices that we may have done for 15 or 20 years may need to change because the environment's changed. The mannerisms of which we fund things have changed. So all that dictates how the response is. But to circle back, and I apologize, I think the relationships and potentially grant writing is something specifically that this office could help in. If we're talking very specific law enforcement things, I would defer that to our partners with the Sheriff's Department as well as our local police chiefs.
And I may have missed this in your opening statement. How long have you and your family been here in Cuyahoga County?
We've been here for 3.5 years. We moved up I moved in June of 15, my wife and then son, and my son, not then son, he's still my son, moved up in September after our house sold in Jacksonville. I'm in University Heights. So.
Okay. So this is a tricky question. So if it came down to the last game in the World Series against the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cleveland Indians, who do you think you're going to support?
That's a tricky question.
I'm going to be ready to support Cleveland and the county and the parade efforts. I think that's what my time will be doing.
Okay, I don't see you in no Jacksonville colors.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have, yes, Councilman Schron?
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleague, Mr. Tuma, asked you what I consider to be probably the easier one, which was what was a positive event that you hold up. So the flip side of that coin is give me your screw up and then tell me what you learned about it.
My screw up through the chair.
My list, mine's pretty long, so.
Oh, no, that's okay. Through the chair to the councilman, sometimes you can get a little eager in that chain of command that you talked about. I'm not too proud to say that that lesson has been learned, and most of the lessons that you learn in this job and in life are because you messed up. And taking it through the right processes, and not necessarily, I want to make sure I paint that picture right, not from someone saying no when you go around them, but from a delayed response when you need to get something done. There are just better ways you can deal with it. I would consider that probably a real answer and not this, I want to be perfect and it's hard to be answer that some people give.
Was there an event or an activity that you would associate with that?
It's the growth of our, the culture change. Culture change is tough. Culture change can take a mental wear on you, which even hits you physical if you let it take enough. Getting one of the great examples which came from this is the Cleveland Division of Police. They normally utilize a mobile command vehicle for everything. That really puts a strain on information sharing. It puts a strain on accountability because you don't know who's where. And I let that be known in a couple of different ways. But I'll tell you, is through the relationships, through the past precedents of what we've done, for everything that's downtown that's a major event, the command post for Cleveland Division of Police and Unified Command is now in the Cleveland EOC. So it's standing by what you believe is right, why you believe it's right. A couple slip-ups along the way with that, but I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Yeah, I was looking for an event, then a corrective action that you would have taken, going back to your military, at least association to them.
Through the councilman, having the right people in the room, we've messed that up a couple times. A good example is St. Patrick's Day a couple years ago, where the young lady fell off the balcony, not having building and housing in the EOC. To facilitate a response, facilitate being able to look at that area to see if they even had permits. That was a hole, that was a gap. And that's something that we filled and that's something that we've changed moving forward to where we've incorporated that partner, which may be a non-traditional partner, into our operations now to fill that gap. But that's definitely an event and a real world consequence. So it didn't hurt the response from a safety standpoint, but it definitely could have been a lot more efficient and a lot easier to work with that owner and to work to see what permits were there to make sure it was right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any further questions? Councilwoman Simon?
Thank you. Just some clarification to your answer to Councilwoman Baker's question about the tools you bring to the table in the event you might see something happening that needs to be addressed. I heard you say that perhaps you wouldn't go to the paper, you wouldn't be public, but you would go directly up through your chain of command to get it addressed. So how do you view this body in terms of your willingness to be forthright, to let us know if you're asked in committee what, if anything, you see could use correcting versus going up through a chain of command? Do you view us as collateral? Do you view us as also perhaps, parallel to that which you need to report? Just your ideas about us as a body and considering that our questions are public and how you would respond to our questions.
Absolutely, through the chair, the councilwoman. A point of clarification on that, if we're talking something that's ethical, if we're talking something that's against the law, they're pretty easy. That's a pretty easy answer for me. I look really bad in orange and I have no desire to, that's not who I am. As a point of answering your questions, what you're going to get from me, you're going to get somebody that answers your questions, they're honest. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer. Or I'm going to tell you I need time to go back and look at it. I'm not going to speculate. As if we're talking about change, I can share my vision of what I think it is. But there has to be that respect to the executive's office and the chief that ultimately that's, as in the executive branch, that's who I report up through. I hope that answers what you were looking for.
You mentioned that you had been in front of the Jacksonville Council at times, the regional council at Jacksonville, I think you said, a city, county council?
It's city council. It's a city county. It's a consolidated city county, yes, sir.
All right. How would you characterize your relationship with the Jacksonville Council?
I think it was very professional. I came prepared. I answered questions honest. I never had any flare-ups or never any issues with the Jacksonville Council. Maybe partially because I wasn't high enough on the pedestal for them to swing at, but the legislative body is an important body, and I recognize that. And if the executive branch and the legislative branch don't get along, it's dysfunction.
Well, you talked about relationships and how important that is, and that's really the heart of this issue, this question that I believe the councilwoman raised, and that's that our relationship with you is going to mean everything in terms of how we are able to work together. I've really been impressed by many of the things that you said today in your own sort of unique way, I think. Is that yours?
Yeah.
Did you recognize it without even turning around? Yeah.
I've heard it once or twice.
And so you also, did you have occasion to appear before the Cleveland City Council?
I've been in front of the safety committee, yes, sir,
safety
on
committee.
things like mass notification. A great example, Mr. President, was we worked through Councilman Zone as the chair of the safety committee, and not only did we work with that committee, but we brought the safety committee and any other council member that wanted to come over to the Emergency Operations Center so that they understood a little more of what we did. Because, I don't believe that this body should be kept at arm's reach. I don't think that it should be, well, you can call the executive's office if you'd like to know something. I think there's a partnership that has to happen, whether it's budgetary, whether it's understanding of operations. And if I'm honest with you and I keep you well informed, through the proper channels, obviously, it cuts down and mitigates on misunderstandings. And you stop a problem before it becomes a problem. And you do that with talking to each other. You do that with honesty. And I know it sounds a little bit grandstanding, but that really is how I am, and I'm not going to lie to you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions by the committee? Councilman?
Yes, are you familiar with a federal program, a weed and seed, 10, 15 years ago? It was, again, a federal program where it focused on weeding out crime and seeding good things into impoverished neighborhoods, high crime neighborhoods. And those monies came to the local councilman in Cleveland, and they were, it brought the residents together in quiet, confidential ways, and they were able to clean up drug activity, to focus on the breaking down abandoned houses. Monies were given to local law enforcement to increase their presence from those federal dollars, and it really strengthened community policing. It made residents in our neighborhood realize we were working with the police and not working against them. What are we going to do? Would you see that within your scope? And have you had any similar experiences of seeking grant funding for law enforcement in this area?
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with that program, but I'm now going to look at it because it sounds like a bunch of different things I've worked on together. I think our office can definitely provide grant writing opportunities, especially if we're talking about a regionalism effort, or we're talking about multiple different communities, because as we know, crime doesn't pay attention to the border of a town or the border of a county, and it affects everybody. That's something that I believe, through planning, through grant opportunities, we could do. I serve on, like I stated earlier, the County Emergency Service Advisory Board, as well as Region 5 for Homeland Security grant funding. I'm one of 6 that sits on that, or will be, or won't be in a little bit. So there is experience in pulling grants together. Less than a year after I arrived in Cleveland, Director McGrath asked that all public safety grant justifications and applications go through the Office of Emergency Management, myself and the Assistant Director, to make sure that the quality and to make sure what we were doing wasn't overlapping, as well as to make sure it was in the mayor's priority. If we're installing a program that completely goes against the vision or a strategic plan, then it doesn't make sense. There has to be a plan for more than this fiscal year or this biennial budget. You have to look out and look at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. As I recognize, the county was here before me, and the county's going to be here long after me. I don't think there's any limiting that we have to do when we're looking at ways to make it better. I hope that answers what you were looking for.
Thank you. Well,
I'm sorry. No. Finish. I thought you were.
Through Weed and Seed, there were many in the neighborhood who were taken out of the community for their negative activities, destructive activities. But we always knew that they were coming back, and several years after they paid their debt to society. So I want to follow up on Councilman Miller's comment about the reentry population, or what we sometimes call the restored citizens. You mentioned Edwin's, and they've gotten a lot of publicity. But here at the county, this council has created a social entrepreneurship program good 5 or 6 years ago. And literally what it did, what it continues to do, is it created 3 companies. One called the Central Kitchen, and I'll just focus on that one. But the Central Kitchen prepares food and sells it to the local homeless shelters. And as this legitimate business operates, they are apprenticing the reentry population. So it is the intersection of human services, which is our mandate, and economic development, job creation, which is also our legal mandate. So where those two worlds intersect, you have this social entrepreneurship program. So we have been doing this for several years, and just as well, if not even better than Edwin's. Certainly we have a larger platform. But that is, again, initiative that's in place, and I'd like you to, again, just be aware of it. And any opportunities to partner, I would certainly encourage you to find those opportunities.
Through the chair, the vice president, I will absolutely look into that. That's not something I'm familiar with at the moment, but I will definitely take a look at that.
Councilwoman Stevens.
My question has to do with your leadership priorities for the department. What would you like for us to hold you accountable to? What do you see your top 2 priorities?
The first is acting in an ethical manner. 'Cause everybody in this room and everybody here is going to make a mistake. If it comes from the right place, I think there's part of that. I'm not asking you to not hold me accountable when I make mistakes, because I know that's not how this job works. What you're going to see out of the offices that I'll oversee, to manage the department, is a plan to move forward. Sometimes I think that we become too much of a prisoner of the moment, and we don't think about how one movement may affect 10 years down the road. A great example of that is in grant purchasing. Grants are not as abundant as they used to be. We have a lot of different teams and a lot of different municipalities in this county. One of the things, working with Mary Beth Vaughn, who oversees the grants here, is putting together a strategic plan for public safety for and having benchmarks. So after 5 years, we expect to be here. It also provides us an opportunity when a grant we may not know about, or new grants that may come up, we can say, this is how that grant can fit this priority that we're looking at. One of my old mentors, Marty Centerfit, had a phrase that I've clung to over the years, and it's excellence through accountability. You have to set a baseline of where you expect your people to be. You have to set a baseline of where you expect that work product to be. And when it's not there, you act on it. So what I would ask you to hold me accountable for, and my leadership priorities, are being efficient with the public's money. We're not going to waste. We're not going to be unethical with it. And the utilization of products like grant money and projects that we have, that we don't end up giving money back to the state. I think that's a big one. I can still hear. Is looking through, because if we get $1 million and we only spend $500,000 of it, we've essentially wasted $500,000. That's what I would ask you to hold me to, is the work product and the things that I tell you I'm going to do, as well as how efficient we do it. Because you can do a job and it's not very good. You can do a job and technically it's done. That's not how I operate. That's not what I expect of my people. That's not how I've gotten where I am today, whether it's as a person or as a professional. We're going to set very clear goals, and they're not going to be low-hanging fruit. I hope that answers what you were looking for.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up.
Councilwoman?
Strategic planning was a phrase you used. Talk just a moment about who it involves and where you go with it.
Yeah, through the chair. If you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know you've succeeded? Mr. Centerfit, again, we worked on his transition to fire chief when I was on that team, and starting a baseline of where you think you want to go, because we can sit here and we can say, and I'll use Jacksonville, so we're not using anything local. Jacksonville Fire and Rescue is the best fire department in the nation. How do you know that? What are the measurements? Is it call time? Is it run time? Is it hiring practices? What are you basing that off of? That may be qualitative or quantitative, but if you don't know where you're going to go or where you want to go, you can't set a path. You've got to have objectives. You've got to have a long-term vision, and then you start to build how you want to get there. Then you start to build how other partners, how grants, how general fund, how donations may play a factor into that. But if you don't know where you're going to go, that would be like me trying to drive to Portland without a GPS or a map. It makes no sense. I wouldn't be able to do it. And if I did, it would take significantly longer and waste a lot of money. That strategic planning is the basis of that. It's your roadmap of how to make your department better, how to make this county better and more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions by the committee? Councilman Schron.
Thank you, Mr. President. Moving is a great deal of disruption for the individual and the family, and you did this only 3 years ago. I assume you were sitting in front of a body similar to this or at some committee telling them why the city of Cleveland, just right up the street here, should be hiring you to do what seems to be similar style of job, and a similar, certainly not, the RNC is never going to come up again of that nature. We're not going to have an event of that size. Why would you, after 3 years, be disruptive again to your family and to yourself to make that change from right down the street over to here?
Through the chair, to the councilman, I was given like I said, everybody has a boss. I was given pretty strict instructions by my boss. We're not moving. The disruption, I don't really see a huge disruption to the family life, to the personal life. We're not changing houses. We're staying in the county. I thought this opportunity was one that I wanted to do. There were facets of this job that I don't do in emergency management, like the witness and victim services, that are a great deal, that mean something. But I don't know that there's a ton of changes that really come to play from the personal side of this.
Job is certainly, and the reporting and the infrastructure and who you do report to and everything like that is the whole new chain of command, and all that is it certainly has to be, I would think, disruptive to you as minimum, maybe not to your family.
It's through the chair to the councilman. Change happens. The opportunity's there, and Chief Carney's not a new person to me. I've worked with Chief Carney since the day I got here almost, when she was in emergency management, and then it's her role as director, and now it's her role as chief. We've worked together. Those boards, like the Emergency Services Advisory Board, provides an opportunity to work with, 2 of the fire chiefs are here now that I've worked with. I don't know that it's a huge disruption. It's different. I will truthfully acknowledge that, but my direct report's someone that I've worked with on, high-level grant funding priorities, stressful times such as RNC planning. So it's not an unknown commodity. I hope that answers what you're looking for.
Further questions by the committee? Seeing none. I'd like to ask for a motion to recommend Resolution R 2018-0230 to the full council for second reading adoption under suspension of the rules.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? The clerk, please call a roll call vote on this.
Calling the roll on resolution number 2018-0230. Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And Council President Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
This resolution will be on the council's regular meeting agenda this evening. Is there any miscellaneous business before the committee of the whole? Seeing none, we are adjourned until the 5 o'clock regular meeting of the council. Thank you.